Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Right Space. I'm Sue Paulson, your host. This is episode number 3 of The Right Space. Today, we're going to focus on journaling for impact. When I was in my 20s, I was going through a tough time because a marriage that I thought was going to last longer failed. And as I was separated and on my own again, it was a tough, miserable kind of existence for me. I felt like a failure. I didn't want to talk about it to too many people because in those days, if you got married, it was till death do you part. And I didn't know too many people in my circle who had been struggling in their marriage and then it faltered and failed. And there certainly weren't very many in my parents' generation who had had that challenge either. So I was a little bit lost. Well, the ideas that came to me at the time were, number one, I don't think I even know what love is. I certainly don't seem to know what it is in relation to having a life partner. And I don't even know if I love myself. Well, a few years previous to this, I had gone through a series of intense personal growth experiences, workshops that helped me gain a better sense of who I was. And I felt kind of on top of the world for a while. And then this marriage failure, and I'm plummeting down into the depths of despair. As only 20-something-year-olds can do, right? So it felt yucky. Well, because I had written in a variety of ways throughout my life up to that point, and I was used to writing out what didn't make sense to me when I had no one to talk to. And when I think back, I didn't really have any solid girlfriends at that time in my life that I could pour my heart out to, and not for any length of time. So writing was my way of making a difference or having a conversation with myself, really. So I started a little journal project that I called Learning to Love Susan. Well, I got a binder, and we couldn't buy journals so much in those days, or I didn't know that you could. So I had some yellow lined foolscap paper that had holes punched in it and a binder, and I just start to write. Well, all of the anguish I was feeling just poured out on the page, and one page would fill up and then another page. And there were lots of times I was weeping as I wrote. Then something very odd happened. I'd write 2 or 3 pages, and all of the crap had come out by that point. And then it was as if somebody was writing back to me, giving me some comfort, some solace, some advice, whatever it was. So I grew up in the days of Ann Landers and Dear Abby. So it was as if Abby was writing back to me, giving me a different perspective or some new thoughts or whatever. Well, by the time I'd finished 3 or 4 pages, because I was writing all that down as well, but it was as if it wasn't me writing it, it was my hand and my pen, but there was this guidance there, and I'm going, whoa, how is that happening? Well, I wasn't sure at the time. Well, of course, now I would look at that as my internal guidance system, my connection with higher consciousness, and realize that somehow I had tapped into that, and there was a voice of comfort there for me. So it was lovely. Well, it happened every time I wrote, that if I got far enough down the pages, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages, there'd be a switch. Sometimes a poem would come out. Sometimes the lyrics to a song would emerge. So there was this fascinating creativity that resulted from me kind of going deep into the well of my own emotions and my own whatever it was that was going on for me. I just made note of it at the time. I just noticed how different an experience it was for me. And because it had been hugely helpful, so I did that for 6 months. I got to know myself a whole lot better in that 6 months than I had probably got to know myself in the previous 20 some years that I'd been on planet Earth. So it was hugely rewarding in a variety of ways. When I think of journaling, and certainly the idea of journaling is that you write every day in your journal. Well, I've never been that disciplined, but when it's important, I pick up my journal and I write something. It might only be a couple of paragraphs. It might go longer than that. It might spark an idea for an article or a contribution to something else I'm writing. Anything can happen with this. So let's unpack journaling just a little bit. I think people have journaled for years. You can go back into history and find journals of farmers, for example, who maybe all they did every day was record what the weather was like, what was happening with the crops, whatever. But you can go back into some of those pioneer journals and see that they wanted a record of what was going on. Now, I think it was rare to find a record of what was going on with them personally, but nonetheless, there was this record of happenings. So journaling is not new. We've given it a kind of a cachet and a different feel for the importance of journaling, because it is a very solid place to go. So I was given a diary when I was in my, probably I was 9 or 10. And that was one of my Christmas presents. It had a little key and I could record my thoughts in there. And of course, the idea was you could lock it and nobody would see your journal. Well, typically a journal is a very personal, what would I call it? It's a very personal book for you. It's typically just meant for you to tuck away in a corner after years of writing in it when it's full, and you just tuck it away somewhere among your souvenirs. Or you might go back through it and say, okay, I wrote that, that was what was happening then, it's not relevant anymore, and you might get rid of it. You might burn it or ditch it or whatever. Well, that's entirely a personal thing, whether you keep what it is you've written or not. What I really feel is important about journaling is that it's a way for us to really express without filters what's going on in our lives, that because we know that it's not for public consumption typically, then it can really aid us in going deeper and going deeper, because so much of what we experience in life, even though we have these outer experiences, sometimes the only way we can make sense of it, at least that's the way it is for me, is to go internally. And then if I'm particularly puzzled or upset about it, then begin to make sense of it through what I'm writing. People who are on physical healing journeys, for example, I know when I was first in the Cross Cancer Institute here, they encouraged us to keep a journal. They didn't really say why, they just thought it was a good idea to document how you were feeling on a day-to-day basis, what your energy level was like, ordinary stuff that they encouraged you to do. And at first, I didn't really see the sense of it. I didn't have the discipline really or the interest to do it on that day-to-day basis. But then as things unfolded, as the whole cancer adventure began to really seed itself in me and feel very, very heavy, it was time to journal. So when I could, I would write about intense moments, about things that had happened to me. And it was interesting how eventually the writings that I had done in my journals for several years, not only through the cancer adventure, but through my near-death experience, culminated in a memoir. So there was material to write a book. So why then? What is it that triggers this desire to take something very, very personal and then put it out to the world? What is that all about? Well, for me, I had a message that I wanted to deliver to those that might find it helpful. I wanted to really dive into because I'd done a huge internal journey when I was going through cancer and other adversities in my life. And I had come to some conclusions that I felt were important. So I wanted to get those out to the world. So at some point, I made the decision to be bold and baldly, in a very vulnerable way, share what was in my mind and on my heart about what had been happening to me, how I felt about it, and what I had thought about the whole idea since its inception, since it came along. Oh, it was not for the faint of heart, let me tell you. There were lots of times when I thought, I don't know, I'm not so sure I should, and there was some fear about people's reactions, people's responses. But I felt compelled. This seemed to be important work. So in anybody's journey about journaling, you can be faced with the same kind of decision. Is this just for me and very private and very personal? I will never share this with anyone. Or you may say, well, certain parts of this I do want to share. Maybe I want to share it with my family. I want to share it with my loved ones. I want to communicate with them in a different way, because on paper, I don't know about you, but sometimes I get tongue-tied when it comes to talking about something that's so intensely important to me. I don't know why, I can't find the words for it, but writing it down brings a clarity, because I can think about it as I'm writing it. I can go over it. And then of course there's the magic of editing, right? And I can actually edit it and say, that wasn't quite what I meant. And so I can go back and scratch out what wasn't working and replace it with something better. So there's a deliberate thoughtfulness that can go into journaling that cannot go into just stream of consciousness talking to someone else. We can really, and of course the filters are there too, that I can't say that, I better not say that way. So there's it's an interesting balancing act in hitting the right tone and being able to look at your intention for writing in the first place. And then when it's time to decide, well, what am I going to do with this? Am I going to do anything with it? Lots of journaling that I didn't do anything with it. I just, okay, that's done, filed it away in some drawer, and maybe years later stumbled across it and said, oh, what was going on in 2001? And I'd go back and read it through with some interest, or what was going on with me when our son was young? Then it gave an interesting historical perspective, and I could see, interestingly, how I'd grown from that. Oh, that's what I was going through. Oh, isn't that interesting? Well, I don't feel that way now. And so it's been an interesting bridge from who I used to be and who I am now to go through those journals and revisit some of that information. So what I wanted to encourage you to do today is to think about the power of journaling, writing words on paper. Now, obviously, you don't need to buy a lovely journal that's just for you, although you could. And I have had the pleasure of being gifted with some lovely journals that I was almost afraid to write in because they're so nice. So I had to get over that. I had to get over the idea that not every word on the page had to be pristine and accurate, that it was okay to cross stuff out, it was okay to make a mess on the page. Oh, but it's such a lovely journal. I don't know what it is about me and paper, but anyway. And of course, I'd have my favorite pen. I went from those awful cheap stick pens to gel pens because they were so much easier to write with, that it wasn't so hard on my hand. Because let's face it, if you're handwriting for 3 or 4 or 5 pages, it can kind of cramp up your hand a little bit if your pen doesn't flow that well. Now, it was a big transition for me to move from writing by hand in a paper journal to writing on the computer. What I found in the transition of that was, because I wasn't born to computers, and so I didn't know if I could think on a computer. Now, for some of you younger ones, you might find that very odd, but for me, I could think on paper. That was easy. But thinking on the computer screen, where I've got my hands on the keyboard and there's more going on than just me and the paper and the pen, then I didn't know what that would be like. It took some time, but eventually, so initially I wouldn't write I would write the important stuff in my journal, and then I would type it into the computer, which is a long, involved process. Well, now, of course, we have more ability to scan and send it. We have the ability to turn. I have one of these lovely little electronic paper tablets called a Remarkable. Well, it now has the ability to take my written text, transform it into typed text, and I can send it to share it on my computer, and there it is for me. So it's not the laborious job that it used to be. And oh, thank goodness for that, because transcribing and moving from handwritten to typed text was tricky at one point. Eventually, as I got more comfortable writing on the computer from scratch, where I didn't have to put it in my journal first, and then I could create a file on the computer and go from there. Then I discovered that the creativity is still high. I'm not so sure if it's as strong for me as still the pen to paper is. So if there's something that's really bubbling up, I'm still more likely to go to paper than I am to the computer. But of course, we have that choice these days. We have this variety. So if your medium is writing on the computer, then write. The most important thing to me is that you write. So maybe create a file called journal or something like that. And that's where you go. You type it in, or you can even talk it in, because certainly on my Word doc program, you can use the dictation and just talk it through and then go back and edit where you want to. So there's lots of ways to do that. I find that regardless of what way I use now to write, I feel compelled more and more to write more and more. Why? Because the impact of journaling for me has been huge. It has helped me through, in my own life, it has helped me through my darkest moments. It has helped me make sense of my world. It has maintained my connection to the the higher ideal of what I want life to be like. That sense of hope, that sense of faith in that the world is unfolding as it should, and that we humans on Earth are good, that we're solid, that we're going to come through whatever it is that's going on in the world. So it has been a huge benefit for me to do journaling. I think that's why it's become quite popular in everyday life. Every time you turn, people are encouraging you to journal. If you go to some kind of a workshop, okay, write this down. Well, writing it down and seeing it on paper helps us make sense of it. And the other thing is, if we're seriously, I don't know about you, but my mind goes a million miles an hour and or faster with all kinds of things. And these days we're bombarded with information, ideas, and lots of times just sheer nonsense that gets stuffed in my head. And especially if I need to make a decision about something, I don't quite know what to do next because there's just so much going on. And I'm going, oh, whoa, stop the world. I want to get off. Well, just putting that down on paper, so doing a dump of all of that onto the page gets it out of my mind. And then I don't have so much going on. Then it's as if it sweeps out the corners of my thinking ability, so that there's room and there's space to come to terms with whatever was most important out of all of that, because a lot of it is just drivel and nonsense and nothing to do with me personally, but it fills my head either because I've been listening to the news or a bunch of people that I've been talking to have been, upset about this or concerned about that or whatever. Most things I have no control over, but because I care about them and I'm concerned about what's happening on our planet, then I worry. And so if you're like me, if you're a worrier, then you need to be a writing warrior. All right. You need to say, okay, let's get this out. And when it's out, I can let it go. I don't need to have it cluttering my mind anymore. So that's the other reason that I found that journaling can be really, really helpful. Just because why do we make lists? So we make I know I make lists because if I don't make a list of either the things that I want to get done or the things I need to get when I'm out and about, I'll forget. So our memories, our short-term memory is short. And so if we want to lock things in, we think about it, we write it down, we read it again. And then it's more likely, even if you forget your list at home, because you've done all those things, you've taken it from really short-term memory into a little bit longer-term memory. And there's a good chance that you'll remember your list when you get to the store, even if you forgot the paper at home, or even if you left your phone at home because that's where your list was. It's all the same. We need to work with our minds and our brains in the way that serves us the best. And for me, journaling is one of those ways that begins to help me make sense of life's oddities, life's challenges, and so on. The other thing that I think is very cool to use journaling for is to write little stories of what's going on in your everyday life that caught your attention, that captured your attention. So particularly with parents and children, I really encourage you to capture on paper those moments of sheer delight in something your child did or something they said. Let's face it, my granddaughters say the most interesting things at times, and I'm captured. Well, at 4, when they're 19, they're not going to remember what they said at 4, But if I write it down and then I tell them at 19, oh, do you remember this is what you said, this is what you told me, and I tell them this little story because I wrote it down and it's there. Well, it's a piece of their history that they get to experience again, but really for the first time because they didn't remember it from before. So I think it's a lovely way. You take your kids to Disney World. Well, write down what it is they experienced because they were young and they might not remember that much about it. And then in later years, you can remind them, oh, this is what happened when we took you to that roller coaster. And then they're kind of amused and interested because, wow, this is a story that they don't remember. And oh, did I really go through that? Well, my parents tell me I did. So it's a way of revisiting experiences that brought a smile to your face and can really delight them as well. Journaling. If you don't have a journal or you've never considered journaling, I'm going to challenge you to pick up your pen or log onto your computer. Just give it a try. Try it out for a week, 2 weeks, and just see if there's what's on your mind. Pick a topic, what's on your mind, and then just do this verbal dump just on the page. Don't edit it, don't filter it, just let it flow. Stream of consciousness writing, where especially if you're overwrought or upset about something, that gets you going, because then you I know anger can really spark that in me, and I'm writing furiously, and then pretty soon I'm calm because I got it all out, and there it is. So it's a very good tool for managing your emotions as well, and first of all expressing them, which we don't often do out loud, but then when you do it on paper, you get it out nonetheless, and there it is. Well, I think that's covers our topic for today, journaling for impact. It can make a huge impact on your own life. It can make a huge impact for other people in how you carry on and deal with them because you sorted it out in your own mind and on paper first. There's lots of benefits to it. I really encourage you to test it out, give it a shot. And if you're interested in a writing community, you can always check out Turning Point Writing Academy. This is a new community that I'm co-creating with Chris Angel. The idea is to gather a group of heart-centered, like-minded individuals who are curious about their world. They want to write. They want to make a difference in the world, make some kind of an impact. And writing is one particular way that draws them in. So turningpointwritingacademy.com is the website. I encourage you to check us out, and in the meantime, I look forward to seeing you here again on The Right Space. Take good care.